If you've been watching the DNC and you saw Barack Obama and Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama, daughter of the South Side, give their speeches, then you would probably understand why their family photo did numbers in Black businesses, churches, and houses.
His limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be Black.
Then Barack Obama hit us with one of these.
There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
The DNC being in Chicago has me thinking about a lot. About the political legacy of this city, about the historic moments in politics that we've had here, and how one of our more recent historic moments impacted my relationship to politics. The first time I ever voted was in 2012, and it was during Barack Obama's second term when he ran against Mitt Romney. I was a college freshman, I'm from Chicago, my school is in Chicago, down the block from the very park where President Obama gave his victory speech in 2008. If there's anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible,
Who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer.
So that night in 2012, my college had an election party where we watched the results come in. And when he won, I remember some of us running out into the streets, cheering, cars were honking. It was a moment. We felt a part of something special, and there was a sense of unity and camaraderie. As this happened down the street at the McCormick Place, President Obama circled back to the idea that he based his whole campaign on from the start: hope.
And tonight, despite all the hardship we've been through, despite all the frustrations of Washington, I've never been more hopeful about our future. I have never been more hopeful about America. And I ask you to sustain that hope.
And here we are in 2024 at the brink of another moment in history, and it's happening in the same building where Barack Obama brought it home in 2012.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
And I have to admit, there's a good feeling in the air, a familiar feeling, one that Michelle Obama acknowledged as soon as she stepped on the stage at the DNC.
Something wonderfully magical is in the air, isn't it? A familiar feeling that's been buried too deep for far too long. You know what I'm talking about. It's the contagious power of hope.
And on that Tuesday night, the baton was passed to the woman who helped campaign for President Obama when he first sought office. As I see again the outpouring of a people desperate for hope, for change, for things to feel okay again, I'm reminded of those early moments of my political formation and how much Obama's presidency impacted this country and Black people specifically. Barack Obama's presence in the White House did a lot for my morale as a young Black man in this country. And he did a lot of things that positively impacted the lives of Black people while he was in office. And so much went under the radar during his presidency. And often when those things are brought to light, it's met with a very similar resistance that I see people having to policy critiques of Kamala Harris. But I will say that at the DNC, when Barack Obama spoke, he said something that I think is going to be very important moving forward. And I hope these are words that we actually take seriously.
We've all got our blind spots and contradictions and prejudices. And that if we want to win over those who aren't yet ready to support our candidates, we need to listen to their concerns and maybe learn something in the process.
Listen to their concerns and learn something in the process. In some ways, very selfishly, I miss the innocence of Barack and Michelle's time in office. There was so much that we just didn't know, and by design. So much that we didn't hold him or this government accountable to. While I was, like many were, caught up in Barack's sincerity, intelligence, wit, coolness, just the image of the Black family in the Oval Office, or him having basketball hoops installed in the White House or singing gospel music. Barack Obama was building a reputation for his bombing campaigns in other countries, something he once joked about.
The Jonas brothers are here. They're out there somewhere. Sasha and Malia are huge fans, but boys don't get any ideas. I have two words for you: predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Lowkey has a song called Abomination that talks about this. Noname talked about this in Hold Me Down when she said the first Black president and he the one who bombed us. Damn. President Obama is the commander-in-chief responsible for the bombing of African countries like Libya and Somalia. And in 2016, it was Barack Obama that signed a historic 10-year, $38 billion aid deal to Israel. His national security advisor said that we are proud that no other administration has done so much to enhance Israel's security. And while President Obama was doing this, the only person that I heard criticizing him was a hip-hop artist from the west side of Chicago by the name of Lupe Fiasco. And these are critiques that even I dismissed back then as problematic and divisive.
Gaza Strip was getting bombed, Obama didn't say. That's why I vote for him. Next one either. I'm a part of the planner. My planner is a peaceful.
So your latest album, Lasers, and the single Words I Never Said is pretty politically charged. I mean, you do mention, though, going against Obama.
My fight against terrorism, to me, the biggest terrorist is Obama in the United States of America. You know, so for me, it's like I'm trying to fight the terrorism that's actually causing the other forms of terrorism. You know, the root causes of the terrorism is the stuff that the U.S. government allows to happen, you know, and the foreign policies that we have in place in different countries that inspire people to become terrorists.
Violence begets violence. Hatred begets hatred, and terrorism begets terrorism. A white ambassador said that, y'all, not a black militant. The ambassador said the people that we have wounded don't have the military capability we have, but they do have individuals who are willing to die and to take thousands with them, and we need to come to grips with that.
He was dismissed for speaking to his conscience and to what he knew then, in the same way that people that are speaking up now are being dismissed as politically uninformed agitators who want everything to be perfect.
I have had many conversations, as you have had, with a lot of young people over the last many months now. They don't know very much at all about the history of the Middle East, or frankly, about history.
Waking up out of my political slumber, so to speak, learning this information about a man in Obama that I related to was devastating. I just did a piece on Dr. Jeremiah Wright and the Obamas. Learning that information was a lot.
The senator came to my home to ask me to stop preaching until after the election. I've been preaching this way for 50 years, regardless of who's running for what office. Carol Moseley Braun, Harold Washington, Barack Obama. That doesn't change or affect or alter the gospel in any way. He said to me, "You know what your problem is?" I said, "What's my problem?" "As a preacher, you have to speak the truth." I said, "That's a good problem to have."
Learning just how hard this country works to suppress information, to keep its citizens busy, distracted, and misinformed has been jarring. But in this moment, as people continue to be criticized and silenced for making demands of their elected officials and holding them accountable, I'm reminded of the DNC in Chicago in 1968, when young people then were protesting the violence of U.S. foreign policy because of the Vietnam War, how the police attacked and brutalized them, how young people were criticized for protesting a war that ultimately claimed the lives of 2 million civilians.
Most delegates to this convention do not know that thousands of young people are being beaten in the streets of Chicago.
I'm reminded of Dr. Ruha Benjamin's prophetic words from back in April of this year, words spoken at Spelman College, an HBCU of mostly black women.
Black faces in high places are not going to save us. Just look at the black proponents of Cop City in Atlanta's leadership class. Black faces in high places are not going to save us. Just look at the black woman's hand, ambassador at the UN, voting against a ceasefire in Gaza. That is, our blackness and our womanness are not in themselves trustworthy. If we allow ourselves to be conscripted into positions of power that maintain the oppressive status quo. Our blackness and womanness are not themselves trustworthy if we support the occupation of black neighborhoods with so-called better trained police, or remain silent about the genocide of oppressed peoples around the world funded by our tax dollars.
Believe me, I understand the nuance of this election moment. As I shared in my video on Project 2025, Donald Trump cannot get elected. I go into some detail there about what their plan exactly is. And for Trump not to get elected in this system is currently constructed, given the posture of the hearts of the people, Kamala has to win. And I know what a Kamala win would do for the morale of young women across the country. I know because I experienced something very similar when Barack Obama became president. That mattered. I also recognize the anxiety people feel about the threat of another Trump presidency, because that dread, That soul sickness I felt after a very memorable 2016. Watching the electoral votes roll in for Donald J. Trump is something I'll never forget. But I also recognize the tendency of us to get distracted, and for us to get caught up in political personality over policy, and for us to cast all of the sins of a nation, sins that it has yet to fully and rightly address, onto individuals that we can tear down for the illusion of progress.
So it's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're going to get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us.
People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
So should VP Harris get elected, as I believe she can, we might see more post-racial conversations. We might get swept up in her intelligence, her humor, the newness of the historic presidency. But when President Kamala Harris makes policy decisions that we disagree with, will we turn a blind eye because things feel normal again? Are we going to have the courage to tell the children the truth? Because those of us who were young people during President Obama's run had to learn the truth later. And the difference between then and now is that the people are seeing the violent reality of American foreign policy while being told they should ignore it to save themselves. But the protesters aren't the problem. The uncommitted voters aren't the problem. These are the people holding the conscience of a nation to account, that said no to Joe Biden to even have this historic possibility that we see before us. The protesters aren't the problem. The uncommitted voters aren't the problem. The policies are the problem, or to this point, the lack thereof. Because at the end of the day, for example, with regard to the Palestinian people, civilians are getting their lives taken. Real people. And they would not be dying without our tax dollars, without the help of our government.
And that as the U.S. explicitly collaborated with the South African apartheid government, it supported and continues to support the Israeli occupation of Palestine, currently in the form of over $8.5 million a day in military aid. The occupation would not be possible without the collaboration of the U.S. government. That is one of the messages we need to send to Barack Obama.
The outcome of this election should not stop us from realizing that there's a lot of work to be done in this country, if we'll ever get it to really tilt towards justice for the oppressed in this land and abroad.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself.
Because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
For all the conversations about hope being this familiar feeling, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that people don't just want the tingly sensations of a familiar feeling. They want a reality rooted in a hope of a future where we could possibly really be free. Love and liberation to you all, and as always, like and follow for more content.
Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go